telling friends that are 40 years old not to jump into this until they've grown it large enough to be able to step away and still provide it in a good way, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, the fitness industry, a lot of people want to do it. It is very competitive. There's a low barrier to entry. And I was telling you, like, at a certain point, to make it work, you're going to have to make a jump or walk through fire, like you're really going to have to fight for it. But there is a reasonable and calculated way to do it. And then there is just an irrational, reckless way to do it. And that also depends on like the point in life that you're at. Like when you're a young kid and you don't have family and responsibilities and you're happy to live in your van and just train people in the parking lot, have at it. But
and that's the time to do it too that way,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Like you're in a different situation. But when you have a family and responsibilities and people you need to support, you want to set yourself up for success. And so there always is this element of balancing risk and reward, right? And be like, okay, I really want to do this, so I'm just gonna like quit my job and start training people. But what's going to happen, and what happens to everybody, is like you're gonna struggle for a while before you actually start making it work. So why not do that almost as like dipping your toe in the water and still taking care of your house, but kind of doing it as a side gig hobby until you build it up and grow it. And then when it's got a following and it's got some security and you see that it has legs and you've been able to figure things out, not just on the training floor, but like most people are new to running a business too. There's like a lot of stuff to figure out with that. Amber alert.
Oh man. There we go. Oh, that was my phone. Did you get it too?
Oh, I got it too. You're in my same area? No, you're not.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, National Wireless Emergency Alerts. That's funny.
Improve alert warning. So this must be the 5G pulse they're trying to activate.
So you have Verizon too, then, I guess.
Yeah, I do. They're telling me, just wait. They're going to start pulsing out 5G, and all of a sudden you're going to turn into zombies. It's brain control apocalypse.
Oh man. So is that how you started your business then? You were working, a full-time job and then kind of moonlighted and started this up as a side hustle, and then it just took off, or how did you start this?
No, not at all. Listen, I'm very grateful for the gifts that I have, but the truth is I don't have I'm good at them, but I don't have a lot of them, right? So I always tell people, like, I'm not that good at many things. This is all that I know, so I have to be great at it, Right. When I was in college, like a lot of people probably who are listening, like you, I'm sure, like I was a lifelong athlete, right? And I grew up in athletics. You were mentioning that you kind of grew up with mixed martial arts and that was your outlet. Sports to me was my safe place and it was such a part of my identity. And then after college, I went into pro sports and I was a professional baseball player. And, like you really get wrapped up in that. And it's a good and a bad thing. Like it's a double-edged sword, right? So rewarding. But at the same time, throughout your life, you're going to have to reinvent yourself. And when my career was over, I decided to retire. I was kind of in a place where I just had no idea like what I was supposed to do. I knew what people thought I was supposed to do, like go get a job, go do this, that, or the other thing. But nothing seemed to really excite me or fill me up like the way I felt playing baseball. And the things that I really liked was like being on a team, having a process every day, working towards goals, feeling like you're of use, utility, kind of like the adrenaline and the excitement of competing. And so, I did my best, but I think I had multiple interviews where I just walked out of there being like, I'm going to shoot myself before I take this job. You know what I mean? Like, no fucking way. I just didn't have it in me, right? God only makes us one way. And so in my last couple of years of baseball, I had a very major arm surgery and my whole elbow was reconstructed. They call it Tommy John surgery. It's like a Frankenstein operation where they take a ligament from one side and put it on another side and try to fix it up. And during that process, that was the first time that I actually really started to get interested by and focus on training, right? Because my thinking was, if my elbow is going to be my weak link, I got to make everything else as big and strong as possible. And so I had this goal of being the biggest, fittest guy in the organization, which in professional sports is like no easy task. And so I had some great trainers, you know, most of them I had to actually outsource and go outside of our baseball organization to even find. But that was kind of my introduction. And when I came back the next year, like everything was awesome. Like I was bigger, I was stronger, I was like a whole new athlete. And I was so into that process of training that a lot of my teammates wanted to like go to the gym with me and be like, hey, I want to do what you're doing, right? Because I had my whole like little program, whatever. And I had a little bit of a knack for coaching and for understanding what training should feel like and what it should look like. And, you know, I think that really great trainers, one of the skills a lot of people don't talk about is just the skill of empathy, of understanding like what the athlete's going through and what it's supposed to feel like and when to push them and when to pull them back.
Right.
So I think that kind of came really naturally to me. And in my last couple of years of playing ball, I was thinking, you know, maybe outside chance, maybe I'll try to be a strength coach. And I was totally thinking like I could go the traditional route, and I got my NSCA CSCS. So that last year on the road, every like 13-hour bus ride, I'd have my nose in a textbook reading, you know, the science and application of strength training and things like that. And then when I was done, it was kind of at the point where I'm like, okay, what do I want to do? So I tried some unquote normal regular job interviews, and that was definitely kind of just like it rubbed me the wrong way. I could just see, I'm like, I can't see myself here. And I decided actually that I was going to go back and play another year of baseball. But in the meantime, I thought, why
Which
not
team were you
try?
playing with at the time?
I was with the Dodgers and the Phillies. I ended my career in the independent leagues. So that's
Okay.
kind of like a melting pot of, you know, people trying to get back to the big leagues or this and that. And really fun, but just like kind of no man's land in some ways. So I was ready. You know, all my friends had jobs and careers and were establishing families. And I was still living in the Howard Johnson Hotel most of the year and going from city to city. So you know, I decided like maybe I'll just go back and play another year until I figure it out. But in the meantime, I'm going to take a job training people.
Yeah.
And so I interviewed at a couple places and got a job in Manhattan at a really kind of cool exclusive gym that was just a very high end bougie kind of gym for celebrities and entertainers and athletes and stuff. And you know,
Equinox, was it?
What's that?
It wasn't Equinox, was it?
No, it's always an Equinox. No, this gym is still exists. It's called La Palestra.
Okay.
And
Sounds fancy.
you wouldn't recognize it as a gym because it's on, they have a couple locations, but the main one is on Central Park West in Manhattan.
Okay.
And there's no sign, it's just a door. And when you go through the door, there are multiple security checkpoints where like you hit a buzzer, you look at a camera, you go down another hallway, you hit a buzzer, you look at a camera,
Oh, wow.
and then you get to like a front desk with a translucent wall. And the idea with this gym is that it's a gym where people who can't train in a normal gym go and train. So like if you're someone who's just going to get harassed at Equinox and bothered, or you just don't want people snapping photos of you or whatever, you go to this gym. And it's got a crazy high ticket price. Like it's an insane membership. And when you train, you have to train with a trainer. And so unlike the other jobs where typically you get paid kind of on the for training hours, right? You're like, oh, you train somebody, they paid $100, you get to keep whatever, you know, 50 of it or 60 of it. This is just a salaried position, and your job was to be available to train people. And I like that because I'm like, okay, well, whether I work or not, I still get paid. So when I started there, like I didn't have a lot of clients. I was just kind of a trainer on call. And every once in a while, somebody would come in and they'd be like, hey, I want to train. And they would be like, oh, well, we got Dave available. He's great. You know, give him a try. And I started to develop a client roster. And after a while, my roster got so big that I was like, man, this does not make sense. Like I am working 15 hours a day and taking home the same paycheck. And, you know, it's getting nuts. And I had one client who I was pretty tight with, and he had kind of, for lack of a better word, had kind of had it with the place. And he said, hey, what do you make here? And I was like, you know, I get paid about $45,000 a year, you know, and it's just kind of the steady paycheck or whatever. And he was like, I'll tell you what, I'll match your salary just to train me. Just train me and I'll match your salary, but I'm going to leave this. And I was like, ooh, okay. And then he was like, and I'll do even better. I got 3 buddies that'll do the same thing. And I'm like, okay, all right, now we're talking. So
Wow, that's incredible.
I took the show on the road, so to speak, and I just started training people privately as my own like little business. And
Yeah.
we were talking before about like the idea of like working for a corporation or working for people, and I'm the kind of person that really thrives under autonomy. Like I like to
Hmm.
create stuff. I like to play by my own rules. I don't like being lorded over.
Yeah.
And when you create something, when you're your own business owner, like whether it's your podcast or whatever it is, your insurance company,
Hmm.
it's a different level of investment that really makes it exciting and rewarding. But it's the
Yeah.
kind of thing that will keep you up at night doing the work or making the
Hmm.
extra effort, where otherwise you're like just thinking, oh, it's time to clock out, like I can't wait to get home. When you are running your own business or you're creating the thing, you're just worried that you're doing a good enough job,
Yeah.
that you're giving the best of yourself and trying to secure, because it's not just something you do, it's who you are. It's your
Hmm.
DNA implanted on every facet of the business. So that business did really well. And I was just training people in Manhattan, like going to, they'd come to me, I'd rent out gyms. And it got to the point where we were kind of ready to start financing our own gym in Manhattan.
Hmm.
And the same client who pulled me out of that last gym wanted to like, let's open up one in Manhattan. We'll give you your own gym. It'll be crazy. You make this
Yeah.
awesome. We were kind of doing CrossFit-esque kind of stuff at that point, although that was
Yeah.
kind of right when I was starting to get into CrossFit. And
Yeah.
I just didn't really love Manhattan. I didn't want to see myself being there for another 10 years.
Hmm.
So I decided to not do that and to move to the West Coast and go to San Diego. And that's where I started my first CrossFit gym.
Polar opposite
Um,
there.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like your whole career as a trainer, like you're just learning a lot. Like you're not just learning how to train people and how to deliver a good product and how to be of service and kind of evolve, but you're also learning some of the components of like how to run an effective business.
Hmm.
And it's not as simple as just being good at what you do. Like you do need to have all the tools, including the tools to understand like how to market yourself and how to create something that is unique and that answers an important question, because this industry is completely saturated. Like
Hmm.
there's a zero barrier to entry. All you need is an Instagram handle and a good physique, and then it's like go buy my program, and
Yeah.
you're kind of like there's nothing really required. You don't need a high school diploma, you don't need a college degree, you don't even need any experience. So, on one side, it's a huge pool to kind of feed off of.
Hmm.
But on the other side, you're kind of faced with this dilemma of like, well, how do I differentiate myself from like the garbage, because everyone tries to lump it into the same pile. And even when I started training, one of my apprehensions in getting into training after my baseball career was that trainers had a stigma, or like training wasn't viewed as like a legitimate career path.
Yeah.
Training was kind of like, I'm gonna be a waiter, you're gonna be a waiter, you're gonna be a trainer.
Right.
It's kind of
It wasn't
working.
as respected,
Yeah,
10
it's
years
like
ago. Right.
it's a job, but it's not necessarily a career. And
Hmm.
I was talking with one of my colleagues, Jason Brown, who has a really great program online called Conjugate X, or Conjugate Conditioning. And we were saying that, like, when I got out of baseball, my dream was just to be able to make $100,000 as a strength and conditioning coach and be
Yeah.
able to, do what I love and feel like I can bring something special into the world and just do that. Now, you know, both of us are like, I feel all this pressure to like have to make $1 million. I'm like, I don't know when that started. That
So you
it's
far exceeded that goal, is what
well,
you're saying.
oh yeah, like I think it's always good to have goals, and your goals should be relative to like where you're at, right?
Hmm.
So, I mean, from where I'm at right now, like I'm no longer a trainer. Like I run a company, and
Right.
the company is way more than me. It's this whole community of people and coaches and support staff. And I never dreamed that I would be in the position that I was in. I thought I was gonna just be in a gym training some people,
Hmm.
and doing that, like coaching teams or something like that. So now it's a completely different landscape, and part of that is just the whole revolution of social media. It made it so that you could mass recruit tons of clients. Like if you have a
Hmm.
special message, there are probably a large community of people that's going to resonate with, and you could potentially really, you can really contribute to and create that special community. But you know, I feel like it also creates a lot of anxiety for me sometimes too, because sometimes I just want to train people and not worry about any of the business stuff. Yeah.
That's funny. I mean, the sky's the limit nowadays with social media, and it's amazing how, you know, it's funny. I have a friend who, I won't name names. If we're lucky, he's listening to this podcast, but he came to me, gosh, a year ago. Was like, you know, was like, dude, I'm gonna start a training business. I'm like, do you have any certifications? No. Did you decide to go to school for this? No. You know, like, what makes you think you're qualified? You know, and of course I've seen this guy, the way he moves.
Well, he probably went to like TikTok University, you know,
Yeah,
like most of these guys.
exactly.
But you're totally right, because and that's not a bad thing, because the
Right.
truth is that you said something before when you were talking about your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the most important thing is to just start. There's a big difference between knowledge and information. Like, information is readily accessible. You can go take a 2-day course from CrossFit. You can take an overnight course from the ISSA. You know, you can get your certification. And what that does is it does provide you usually with some level of insurance if you fuck up.
Right.
You know, these organizations usually do cover you insurance. So there is basically covering some liability in that regard. But in no way does it help you build knowledge and practical experience. I studied for this huge test, the NSCA CSCS. It took me about a year to study for. It's like a 700-page textbook, you know.
Well, that's what you have to have a degree for, right?
You have to have a degree for it. You have to be able to pass all the physiology, the kinesiology, and the practical training components of it. But looking back, I was so proud that I passed that test, but I was not a good trainer yet. You know, I didn't know anything. Right. I knew how to regurgitate phrases, but I didn't know what it really meant. And that's the difference, is like saying the words is different than understanding what it really means. You may be familiar with the concept, but training is not just in the prescription of the concept, it's in how you coach it. It's in how you're adjusting to what you're seeing, as you're like listening with your eyes, or kind of getting better at the finesse of that feedback loop between prescribe, assess, and adjust. Like that's really the art of coaching. And there's no way to replicate that without putting in the work. And so that's what I think, that's what great trainers do. And, you know, right now we're talking about social media. You know, the best trainers in the world are probably folks that people don't even know, because they're not spending their time doing TikTok dances and trying to be like, buy my program now. They're creating champions. They're making different, they're just doing it because that's like that. They don't even need to. The proof is in the pudding. Like, just look at the results, you know? Yeah. So like, they don't need to play that game. And so like, there is a big difference there, but I think it is good to just start, just understand that, you know, there's always going to be a learning curve. And as long as you're willing to approach it from the standpoint of, I want to get better each time I train a client. I want to try to, like, having a notebook, writing down stuff like, what did you learn? What could you do better? What do you want to do next time? Like that's how you actually take the steps, but you have to go through the process.
Oh yeah. The learning curve and trial by fire, as you said earlier, you know. It's funny you mentioned the the NSCA, and that was my first certification. I failed by one question. I have a thing with failing tests by one question.
Just his hair short.
One question.
I think they say that to make you feel better. You're like, oh, well, if I come back next time, then I'll get that right.
I think it was just their basic CPT or certified personal trainer course. And then, so I failed that one, and they just came out after I failed that one with the tactical strength conditioning one. And I thought that was cool. I don't know if they still have it, but the acronym for that was the TSAC. Yep. So my first certification was the TSAC, which I just find hilarious, you know. But so that was my first one, and then, you know, of course now, you know, CrossFit certified, but I want to get my L2 next. But I feel like a lot of these certifications, do you renew yours, or do you typically get the base knowledge and then, do you even have one anymore? Because it's really not needed once you've built the accreditation, right?
Well, you know, continuing back to the story of my training career, after opening up a few gyms, right? So I moved to San Diego, opened up a CrossFit, moved to Boston, and I started running Reebok CrossFit One, which was right at the beginning of the partnership between Reebok and CrossFit. They asked me to go out there, and the idea was to integrate CrossFit into the Reebok community, and they were going to have this big, awesome headquarters flagship gym. after doing that, I pretty much exclusively did education, right?
Really?
And I would tour around. This is for the better part of a decade, from 2010 to, from 2010 to 2020. I taught the level 1, the level 2, and a couple specialty courses. And I
Yeah.
ended up teaching about 400 seminars. I think I ended up coaching over 20,000 trainers, just, teaching these courses for CrossFit. And, as time goes by and you are able to kind of see the writing on the wall, I started coming up with my own ideas on these concepts. I thought, I agree with some of this, but I certainly don't agree with all of it based on what I'm seeing. I kind of have a hard time saying these lines when I kind of know better, So ultimately, that's what led me into starting Thundrbro and coming up with my own community, my own mantra, my own methodology. And with the CrossFit certifications and stuff like that, I mean, the way the certifications work is it is important for education, but really it's a money-making machine. And that's true at the NSCA, CSCS as well. In terms of continuing education units, that's a way for the company to stay in business, where they don't need to just get people in that level 1 or in that CSCS course, but then there's reoccurring revenue each year with the conference or with getting additional CEOs or taking the online courses, right? So it all feeds itself. For my insurance, the insurance that I use is from the NSCA. I don't think CrossFit provides insurance to individual practitioners. I think they do have a gym insurance plan.
They do, and it's a what is this called?
The risk retention something.
It's not true insurance. The risk retention group, it only holds something like $2 or $3 million back. So like if 10 gyms were to have a massive claim at once, they'd be screwed.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's kind of exclusively for like rhabdo or something like that. The insurance I use as a trainer is really, I get from the NSCA, CSCS. And in terms of, I always think if something happens, if I decide to leave the company, if I want to take a job, and I've been offered jobs with like the military or with universities or Major League Baseball teams, like this is a prerequisite to have a valid and active CSCS. So I've maintained my CSCS, and granted, just like CrossFit, like I don't agree with everything the NSCA has to say. I think they got a lot of things right. They also got quite a few things wrong. But in terms of maintaining it, like I maintain my CSCS, and I'm sure that my CrossFit level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4, they're all kind of like, they keep on leveling up, right? I was, I guess, like what they would call level 4, but I haven't been back. They called me a couple of years ago and they're like, "Oh, you're going to expire." And I was like, "I'm good. I'm pretty sure that I can teach that course. So I'm okay." But it's good to get education. And I think one thing I would encourage people to do is, like, if you're a new trainer or someone who's looking to develop, yes, take the courses, right? Go and read the books, take the courses, expand your knowledge base, but also don't underestimate the value of mentorship. Like if there's somebody out there that you want to be like, if there's a strength coach that you're like, "Man, this guy's fucking awesome, and he's crushing it with his business," or they're doing something interesting, see if you can actually, in one way or another, and there's so much going on remotely now too, see if you can actually get in their presence and just absorb and practice. I think that's the best way to learn, is just being in that environment and seeing how people do things, and even doing it yourself. We were talking about some of the valuable skills of being an effective trainer and coach. And I think one of the biggest ones that no one talks about is empathy, right? And so that idea of empathy being like, I understand what this is supposed to feel like. I understand what they're supposed to feel like. I understand when to push. I understand when to hold back. But if you're not doing your program, or you're so disconnected from training that you forgot, it's hard to maintain that skill. It's a perishable skill. Training is a perishable skill. Programming is a perishable skill. So you need to be practicing and you need to be training. And I think that great trainers are also lifelong athletes. And all the guys that I really look to as colleagues and seek for advice, these are guys who are like now in their 40s and 50s, and they're still doing insane things in the weight room, because that's all part of it,
Yeah. When it's a party like that, it never goes away. I'm 32, and still training competitively to do something, like right now, the next goal is, well, I don't like to name my goals off just because, it gives you some level of accomplishment, but, I've got goals that I want to aim for in the future. And then after that, maybe look into an endurance sport and try, achieving something there. I don't know. I like pain a little bit, so it makes it easy to keep doing that. But, as a business owner, a gym owner, a coach, that's something that'll never leave me. Maybe at some point it's not as competitive, but always be training for something,
Oh, I think that's so cool. And it's so
Mhm.
congruent with like a growth mindset. One of the guys that I always love talking with is Mark Bell, and he's the
Oh yeah.
owner of, Slingshot and Super
Hmm.
Training. One of the things he's done that I'm so impressed with, because like when you're good at something, it's really hard to leave that thing. Like it was very hard for me to leave baseball. It was
Yeah.
very hard for me to leave CrossFit. Mark has like invented himself 3 or 4 times just
Mhm.
personally as an athlete, where he started as a power lifter and he was like, you know what? This just isn't it for me. I'm not getting what I need out of it. It's kind of
Yeah.
unhealthy. I'm going to try bodybuilding. He did that for a while. Now he's like getting into endurance training.
Mhm.
Do you know how hard it is for like big guys with lots of muscle, to look in the mirror and be like, you know what? All this muscle that I identify with my self-worth, I'm just going to get rid of that and be
And
a
work years
normal looking
for
person.
too.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you know what? It's always there. Once you have it, it's always there. It's always going to come back quick, but it's hard to let go of that emotionally, because there's that identity attachment to it and
Right.
that value, like guys looking in the mirror, be like, oh, I feel small. It's really hard to get over that. And it's hard to let go. But when you are able to do that, like every death also has a rebirth, and
Right.
you might be surprised at how fruitful and rewarding that rebirth can be. For
Mhm.
me, when I was doing CrossFit, like it was everything to me. It was my circle of friends, my career, my passion. I met my wife there. All we did was talk about CrossFit with all of our friends. I competed in CrossFit. Every day was like looking at the CrossFit websites and the
Mhm.
CrossFit podcast and CrossFit until your face was blue. And
Exactly.
then one day, I came to the realization where I'm like, I don't think this is the best thing for me anymore.
Hmm.
And it was really hard because there was so much attached to that was hard to kind of let it go. And I honestly did go through like a little bit of a depression, but when I came out of it, it opened up this whole new world to me in the shape of hypertrophy training and creating really this new kind of hybrid model of form and function, or performance and aesthetics. And it was way more than I could have ever imagined.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people that are subscribed to these name brands or methodologies, whether it be like CrossFit or powerlifting or Olympic lifting or Zumba or, F45, Orange Theory.
Yeah.
What I encourage them to do is think about them like, don't subscribe to the brand, subscribe to the principles,
Mhm.
because the principles have pliability, but the brand is finite, right? So like,
Exactly.
if you only subscribe to like, let's say CrossFit, bicep curls don't really line up with that, right? Doing certain things don't, like, even from a dietary or methodology perspective, it doesn't line up. But if you think about just kind of the principles of, hey, we're going to perform functional movements and we're going to change things up and we're going to learn to work with intensity. Now you have wide application. Doesn't need to be in a CrossFit gym. Doesn't only need to be with the barbell. You know what I mean? Like you can do it in a lot of different ways, and you don't have to feel like you're betraying yourself or your community in some way. And same thing with like, diets too. Like, you look at these diets that have name brands like carnivore diet or
Trendy
keto,
diets. Yeah.
intermittent fasting, right? And you're like, oh, I have to do this intermittent fast, I'm a vegan, right? That kind of stuff. And if
Mhm.
you think about the principles have a lot of pliability. Like, yeah, eat a carbohydrate restricted diet at times. It has some context and utility. Yeah, eat a diet that's rich in micronutrients. That has certain context and utility. Do intermittent fasting. That has context and utility. And also you can go completely on the other side of things, and you could eat like a bulking bodybuilder diet, and that has context and utility too. It
Yeah.
just depends on where you're at and what you're trying to accomplish. But when you're locked into one, the things that those diets or training programs exclude exactly describe where you're going to fail.
Mhm.
So, it's nice to kind of maybe think about these things as like a palette of colors, where you're just painting a canvas and you have all these colors to kind of mix and choose from to
Mhm.
be able to create the picture that you want.
I love the way you paint that picture. No pun intended there. Yeah, there's a lot I want to unpack there because we talked about identity, we talked about nutrition, and we talked about training methodologies. So going back to the identity, that's something when I was, really I struggled with until 2 years ago, maybe. Like it is, I was a successful salesman. Before that I wasn't an incredibly successful athlete, but was doing the things. And coming out of that sales career, I had gotten the team or the title that I had wanted, was making the income I wanted. And then it was like I went into this thing for about 5 months in recruiting, where I was sitting in a gray cubicle, and talk about one of those jobs where you want to fucking kill yourself. That was it. And through that, and then started in selling custom clothing. It's like, man, I'm not a suit guy. I don't want to sell clothing the rest of my life. It was a great career, great business to be in, but I tied my identity to what I was doing. And then you switch it up again, and it's like, okay, well, now I'm a gym owner, I do insurance, I do a few, I have a few things going on now, but but like I try not to tie my identity to any one of those things, because all of those could be taken away in an instant, and where I try to wrap my identity up is in my faith and in my family. So for you being, a pro athlete, I mean, that's huge success, right? That's, that's something that walking away from, it's kind of like, somebody coming out of the military, serving a greater purpose than themselves, and then going into civilian life. How did you kind of go through that identity shift?
Oh, it's not easy, dude. That's not easy for anybody. Any transition is usually scary. It's usually hard. It's usually uncomfortable, but it also is what's required. We talked about, like, at a certain point, to have the life you want, you're going to have to walk through fire, like that's just the reality of it. And I think the universe is always talking, you might not like what it's saying, but it is important that you kind of listen to the writing on the wall, because it's usually pushing you in the right direction if you're willing to hear it. And for me, like, when I was growing up, I had an interesting childhood growing up, because when I was 5, my mom and I, we were in like a really horrific car accident. So we were in a little Isuzu rental car. We went head to head with the minivan. It was just, I was about 5 years old. It was horrific. We were in the hospital for weeks and weeks. And when I got out of the hospital, I went into kindergarten and I didn't talk. I was just, they thought I had autism or something. And,
Wow.
and like, what's going on? Well, it's a post-traumatic stress, right? And it took me a really long time to get over that. And it presented kind of socially, where it's like, I was quiet, I was shy, I was scared. I was even, going into middle school, like I was afraid to talk to girls. I was afraid to be loud. And the one place that I felt confident and powerful was like in gym class or at recess. Right? And I was like, oh man, like I'm in control of this environment. Like I can do what I want. Nobody can stop me. Like it was this opportunity for me to be the big version of myself. And then, as you progress as an athlete, you figure out like, well, play all these sports, but I'm kind of really good at this one thing. So I'm going to, for me, it was like focusing on baseball, and baseball took me to this point where I could be this person on the field, but now I felt the confidence to be this person off the field too, where I could be this big version of Dave, and confident and happy and just vibrant, right? So I think baseball for me was a vessel for me to express my gifts. And then it turned into like athletics or this and that. But I guess my point is, all these things that we do, we usually do what we like what we do, and we're usually pretty good at those things that we like, right? You're like, I have a talent for this, I do it a lot, I'm pretty damn good at it, I feel like the big version of myself here. It's just a vessel for you to express who you are, to express your gifts, whatever those may be. Like I love bringing big energy and cracking jokes and having fun and getting out of hand and expressing, positive aggressiveness. Like that's what really gets me humming. And there are so many different ways to do that. But if you can focus on just those characteristics of what makes you feel like the big version of yourself, like that person you're proud to, the man you aspire to be, you can apply that to a number of different things. I never thought that I would love writing. I was like, I'm a baseball player, I play sports, but I love writing. It's an opportunity for me to bring my personality and to show some knowledge and kind of do what I do with my athletes, like education, all that stuff. So I think there's a lot of different avenues to go down if you know what your gifts are. you can apply them in a zillion different ways. So it doesn't have to be the thing you're doing that is determining who you are. And I think that's really the big evolution that you realize is like, it doesn't matter if you're playing baseball or doing CrossFit or competing in bodybuilding or coaching athletes or writing books. You're the same guy in all those environments. You know, you're bringing out that same component of yourself. Yeah. So I think that's a really important realization. And, you know, like it took me a long time to get there. I tell folks, like, I didn't really have any clue who I was until I was about 30. And even then, even now, I'm still kind of discovering myself and packing and unpacking shit and having to go back and fix, you know, problems and, you know, look deep into why I do some of the things that I do. And it's been a fun journey. It's like a really fun journey if you're willing to be open to it. The fact is, some people just get really uncomfortable at looking at themselves. And you know, that's fine. That's different strokes for different folks. For me, I got to feel like I'm getting somewhere. I got to feel like I'm making progress towards something. Otherwise I get very anxious.
I'm right there with you. Like, yeah, I still, you know, I still unpack things from my childhood, and, you know, some people look at that and it's like, oh, we'll just pack it away. Well, I did that for many years, and I'll tell you what, it creates a lot of anger. It creates a lot of anxieties. It creates a lot of stuff that when you have a family is not necessarily something you want to come out, right? So, you know, my wife and I went through a hard time in our marriage, and we, you know, we unpacked a lot of that, and it helped me understand, like, oh, that's why I do that. That's why I respond that way. That's why, you know, I get this feeling when this happens, right? And it's, I think that is a special skill that most people either don't have or they just don't want to pay any attention to, of looking deeper within themselves and really breaking that down and trying to grow, trying to get better. And I think that's something cool that, you know, within the careers and sports and the things that we've done, is it teaches you to embrace that. It teaches you to embrace that pain, because, you know, on the other side of that, you're going to be better for it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of becoming more and more of a requirement for long-term effective marriages, is like, you know, you're going to change so many times in your life. You're not the same person you were when you got married or when you were dating or whatever it might be. And, you know, you want to try to change together, you know, and have that. If one person is willing to change, but the other person is resistant, it's going to be a hard time, you know, because they're just fundamentally on different wavelengths. But luckily, my wife, Camille, is just an angel, and she pushes me in all the right ways. And I push her too. And we make a lot of mistakes. But the thing that kind of saves us a lot of times, like, we're willing to look at ourselves, and we're not afraid to really ask some hard questions. You know, like, one of the things recently, like, when we moved to Colorado, you know, we had different opinions on a lot of the stuff that we're doing now. Like, we had different opinions on
Where'd you guys meet, by the way? Did you meet in San Diego or in Colorado?
No, we met in Lake Tahoe during a CrossFit exhibition in 2010.
Oh, cool.
It's a really cool series. It's still online, called the Tahoe Throwdown. And this is back when there were like two sponsored teams, Team Rogue, Team Again Faster. We were on the same team together, and we hit it off. And that weekend basically deconstructed all of our lives. We both went home and we're like, all right, I'm gonna have to ruin my life now. And completely, because we were like very clear what I should do. And we both completely uprooted ourselves, and, you know, we're married within a year. But I'm sorry, what I was gonna say, I got a little bit lost there. You have to remind me where I was at. Our opinions on stuff has really changed. You know, not just on training and nutrition, but also on things like hormone replacement therapy, marijuana, mushrooms. Like, you know, when I was growing up in sports, like, I was just told that, like, you know, marijuana is this awful, dangerous thing. It's a gateway drug. You're going to be a loser if you do it. Testosterone is dangerous. It's cheating. You're going to hurt yourself. Mushrooms are going to fry your brain. And a lot of that is, honestly, it's just propaganda. And it's propaganda by people who are kind of threatened by it. And as time goes by, we realize that, like, a lot of these things that we had such strong emotionally charged opinions on have a little context and utility. Like, we used to be like completely anti carbohydrates, like, carbohydrates are going to kill you. Carbohydrates, the root cause of all evil. And now we're like, no, carbs definitely have a context and utility, and there's definitely a good application for them in the right environment. You just need to understand them better. Well, you know, when I mentioned my elbow reconstruction surgery at the end of my career, that was a time when post-op, I was on a lot of painkillers. So I was on Vicodin, Dilaudid, Percocet, all the painkiller stuff. And I started taking them too much. And I actually got to the point where I felt like I couldn't really sleep without taking them. And then I had to take more and more. And it became this whole thing where we had to have like a whole intervention and be like, okay, you got to get off these pills. And thank goodness I was able to get rid of them. But I realized like I should never touch that stuff. And so at the end of my CrossFit career, both Cammie and we both had like really major surgeries. I had a back reconstruction surgery and Camille had shoulder reconstruction. And unfortunately, this is not like an uncommon type of outcome for high intensity CrossFitters over a lifetime. Like a lot of backs, a lot of shoulders get fucked up.
What did you do to your back?
So, you know, you have all these discs in your back that are these fibrous casings with, you know, liquid inside that provide as a cushion between the vertebral columns, right? And sometimes if you lift poorly or too intensely or get out of position, the fluid inside can push hard towards one side of the disc or another and create a tear called an annular tear. So it's the annulus of the disc. Well, I mean, this happened to me a dozen times where I'd torn the disc again and again and again and again in the same place, in different places, just like I would hurt my back, I would rehab it, I'd go back to doing CrossFit and I'd hurt my back again. And it was just rinse and repeat, right? And over time, you know, you end up with just like constantly degenerated discs where the disc stops holding fluid and height and starts to reduce. And along with that, you get less space, not just between the vertebral columns, but also in the foraminal canals that the nerves run out of. So I had such bad stenosis, which is a narrowing of those canals, that I was starting to lose function in my legs. And that was the kind of thing where I was like, oh, fuck, I think I got to get surgery now because my leg is just dragging behind me and I can't feel it. And it's starting to really atrophy. So it was getting bad. And you know, the surgeon kind of showed me, he made the analogy is like, you know, these nerves are supposed to look like spaghetti and yours is like a piece of fettuccine. And so that's why the compressed nerve is giving you so much, you know, loss of feeling and that kind of stuff. So they went in, they drilled bigger holes in the discs. They tried to, into the foraminal canal. So it's called a foraminotomy. And then they also took stem cells and tried to inject them inside the disc to see if some of those tears could actually heal a little bit. And it was enough to just get me out of that state where like I have function in my leg again, right? Yeah. But you know, that was kind of the big aha moment for me where I was like, hey, Dave, and like a lot of athletes out there, like you're a lifelong athlete. You find so much joy in movement. You know, this is something you're going to want to do as long as you can. How are you going to honor this new lease on life that you have for your training career? You know, like the technology to do this, like if we were 50 years ago, you'd be fucked. You'd be like, okay, good luck. Sit on the couch the rest of your life, right? Or figure it out. But we're lucky that we live in a time and that I had the resources to even get this surgery or try these technologies. And so my question was like, how am I going to honor that? Am I going to just go back to doing what I was doing? Or am I going to learn my lesson and learn how to think differently? And so that's what ultimately drove me into that mixture or blend of hypertrophy and functional movement, right? Is like figuring out how can I lift intensely and grow size and strength and muscle and maintain capacity while taking the big players associated with injury out of the equation, like speed, going as fast as you can, or load, going as heavy as you possibly can.
Right.
And the answer was hypertrophy training. And I actually thought like, you know, a lot of people that come to CrossFit, they think they know what hypertrophy training is. They said, I did some bodybuilding before, but they have no idea what it was. They were probably doing the right thing, but the wrong way, because good hypertrophy training is super intense, crazy effective, and perfect for a CrossFitter.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, you know, CrossFitters have two incredible skills that most people in the gym will never acquire. Okay. And those skills are, they know how to move. So they know how to back squat, they know how to deadlift, they know how to press, they can do pull-ups. They understand the positions and the patterns of these compound functional movements that have so much context and utility outside the gym, but are also monsters in terms of efficacy and potency. Like the amount of adaptations you can get out of a good back squat is insane compared to like leg extensions or hamstring curls or things like that. Right. And when you go into a traditional gym, you usually either don't see people doing those movements at all, or you see them doing them terribly.
Yeah.
Right. So you already know how to move. The other thing that CrossFitters know how to do is they know how to work with intensity. Like they'll do pull-ups until their hands bleed. They'll condition until they puke. Like they understand how to push. They understand that idea of the rate of perceived exertion and how to work at the limits where you're exhausting muscles. The only change they need to make is just channeling those skills in the right direction, right? Where instead of doing it as heavy as possible or as fast as possible, maybe you're doing submaximal loads under control and just completely exhausting muscles in a more controlled fashion that allows you to move safely and more effectively build muscle. Because that's like the other big thing is like the average person going to the gym is there for two reasons. They'll say, I want to look good and I want to feel good. That's like the most popular answer, right? Most people don't go in the gym being like, I'm here to be the fittest man on earth. That's usually not the answer. Sometimes they get peer pressured in some ways into that kind of, or they start feeling like, okay, you know what? Chasing performance does excite me. But I think it's important for people to remember, why are they really there? Like, what's the reason for them being in the gym? What do they want to get out of it? And for me, you know, I thought back to that time when I was like a freshman in high school, in the high school weight room with the dumbbell rack in front of the mirrors. And I started doing bicep curls because I wanted to look like a superhero. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I want to look awesome. Like, yes, I want to be able to do stuff. Yes, I want to be able to play and express my fitness and play with my daughter and run 10Ks and do all these cool athletic things outside the gym. But most importantly, I want to be able to wear my fitness on my body. I want to walk into a room and have people go like, wow, that guy's an outlier. That guy must train. Like, you know,
people look fit.
The girls, exactly. And it's so rewarding. And I think in CrossFit, that's not only not talked about as much, but in some ways it's even diminished. Where Greg Glassman would say, you shouldn't have mirrors in a gym. Mirrors are stupid. Well, mirrors are not stupid. If you're someone who's invested in your physical appearance and your physicality, being able to look in a mirror and see improvements is just as important as being able to see your deadlift going up and your mile time going down. So I don't know why you would diminish it in any way, because it is an important component for a lot of people. So that's kind of the big evolution for me at that time. And honestly, for most of my athletes, they're in a similar boat where, you know, the vast majority of them come from CrossFit. A lot of them were pretty competitive CrossFitters, but they're at the point where they don't know what to do. And they're kind of between a rock and a hard place where they're like, what now? Right. I'm kind of getting banged up doing CrossFit. It's a little too much on me. My performance is going down. Is there anything left to pursue? It really kind of takes the wind out of your sails, and it can make you feel super discouraged, and there's not a lot out there for them. So, you know, to me, that's what Thundrbro is. It's that second life, or that breath that we can breathe into people to be able to show them that you can still thrive and not just survive through this or go through this inevitable decline in a way, just by, you know, kind of not changing what you're doing, but changing the way that you're doing it.